In front of a palace, skeletons fight against the humans. The humans have gods who can grow trees which separate the army and can heal human soldiers when they fall. Inside the palace, the Lord of the Underworld is watching this battle on a ball of fortune while a maid informs him that the 6 heroes are gaining an offensive. Next to her, a wolf-looking creature mentions the defeated members of their team. The Lord of Death then calls upon a wand to fight when the animal mentions that he is the only demon lord, to which the demon lord accepts defeat from the humans, but says that he will get revenge in 1,000 years when he will rise again for this throne. The scene then changes as 2 girls stumble upon the palace, now worn down. They are investigating. The white-haired girl, Celia, reports back mentioning that they are on the 7th floor of the palace. The blonde-haired girl, Regina, tells her not to get carried away. They stumble across fallen statues. They see that a door is active and that there's still magic there. Regina tries to open it, but it doesn't work, and he mentions that they can burst it down. Celia pulls out her phone to understand the language in front of the door. Regina goes on to explore on her own while Celia tries to figure this out. Celia touches the door and the door suddenly opens. The path to a purple crystal starts getting lightened with purple fire as Celia walks in with a gun in her hand. She goes on to help the person there. The same thing changes to a flashback where the Demon Lord has found someone called Rosalia. The Demon Lord mentions that a millennium from now a human child will be a vessel of his powers. Back into the scene, Celia shoots her gun to the stone, but the stone doesn't move. Suddenly the stone breaks into pieces and Celia falls to the ground. The Demon Lord looks at the girl and mentions how beautiful she is. Just then Celia opens her eyes and she's confused to see a child in such a place. The Demon Lord is shocked to see himself reincarnated into a small child. Demon Lord has returned to his form as Linus the hero. The Demon Lord mentions how utterly ridiculous this form is. Celia asks if the Demon Lord is feeling better and then tells him her full name. Celia mentioned that she's a swordsman in training at the 18th platoon at the 7th Assault Garden Excavator Academy, and that she's only 15. She asks the Demon Lord what his name is and he answers that his name is Leonis. Celia thinks that it is an adorable name, giving him the nickname Leo. She asks how old he is and he mentions that he is 10 or so. Celia mentions that someone might have kidnapped him and put him under a void, to which the Demon Lord is confused as to what to a void is. A change of scene, we see Regina walking down a hall when a purple crystal breaks through the wall, and she pulls out a gun. Celia goes on to explain what a void is. It is a sort of amnesia. The Demon Lord asks what calendar year it is, the Holy God calendars. She mentions that if it has been 1,000 years ago it would have been the year 1447, but in the unified human calendar when it's been years 64. The demon god is caught on guard by this. Celia hears Regina through her earphone as the building around them starts to crumble. She activates her gun as a monster steps out. Demon Lord watches as Celia tries to fight off the monster. He tries to use his powers but falls on his face. Regina shoots this monster. Demon Lord is confused about what kind of weapons the women are using. Regina fights the monster as Celia grabs Leo and runs out. A crystal falls in the ground and releases another void beast. Celia pushes Leo to run as she pulls toward ready to fight the void. The Demon Lord is ready to cast a spell, but she pushes him to the side, getting slashed in half as the Demon Lord wonders why she did this. The Demon Lord turns around and calls upon his wand ready to kill the beasts. He casts spells killing them. He mentions how in his current body his magical powers are 1/3 of the strength they were when he was the Demon Lord. She looks at the girl and says that the life of a human does not matter to him, but he must pay tribute to Celia's soul as she risked her life trying to save him. He casts a spell on her and the blood around her starts to go back in her body. Celia opens her eyes slowly and coughs. Demon Lord oversees the original on the other end and wonders how high-tech technology came to be. As soon as Celia wakes up, she gives Demon Lord a hug, saying that she's so glad that he's alive. Regina runs to Celia and then asks if she's hurt. She also asked if she had to fight the void, and she's confused because when she looked up the void was already gone. Finally, Celia, Regina, and the Demon Lord drive away on the motorcycle. The episode opens with a flashback to 6 years ago, where in the 3rd Assault Garden, a dragon with bats attack and inside reside many humans, praying. There is a young Regina and Celia who are terrified and holding onto each other. Young Celia comforts young Regina, saying that her dad alongside with her mother and sisters are fighting and that they've never lost before. Just then, the room's alarm turns on. Young Celia tries to tell young Regina stories of her father, giving her books to try to distract her and make her feel less scared. She also talks about her education and how Celia should join her. The young girls laugh with tears in their eyes. Young Celia runs to want to help her parents, but Regina stops her. The two girls fall asleep when the door opens to a broken home. Young Celia falls on her knees apologizing to Regina for lying to her and telling her it's all going to be okay. The flashback ends and in the present, Regina, Celia and Demon Lord ride on a motorcycle to the city and the Demon Lord is shocked at the city. When they arrive, Demon Lord learns that this city is not an island but it's a mega float. This surprises the Demon Lord. Celia reports back saying that they've found a refugee boy and he has a holy sword. Regina is shocked at Demon Lord's holy sword and Celia mentions that he saved her life and now he's a part of the Excalibur Academy where they are provided with a certain standard of living in exchange for them enrolling in the academy. Demon Lord agrees but he has to go through an examination. He enters the bathroom and is upset because his goal was to become the Demon Lord and bring humanity to its knees, but now they have evolved a lot in the technology world and also the fact that he is stuck in his body. He calls upon the maid and the beast and they are there to serve him. He informs that the reincarnation magic didn't work properly, and the beast mentions that he has been turned into Leonis the hero as he once was before he became the Demon Lord. The Demon Lord mentions that the island they are currently on is artificially created and is named the seventh, meaning that there are 6 other ones. He tasks the beast and the girl to investigate this and find out the strength of the human army before he forms his demon army. Meanwhile, the Demon Lord is going to infiltrate the human military education factory. The two then disappear and the Demon Lord goes out and his examination begins. 2 metal rods examine his body and the doors open for him to enter. The Demon Lord walks through and the room turns red due to mana suppression. He walks too hesitantly, thinking about how he needs to be cautious. He achieves a card and through scanning it, Celia can schedule the Demon Lord Holy Sword Inquiry, as when someone who enrolls in this academy they have to register the properties of their holy sword, and once that completed, Demon Lord will receive an official student ID. Demon Lord thinks to himself that he will trick the humans. Celia keeps his student ID. The Demon Lord examines the city and mentions how peaceful it looks. Celia gives him a tour of the academy. Then, Celia explains that the Holy Sword Inquiry will take place tomorrow at the outdoor training grounds. The group of students walk towards Celia and mention her battle scar, belittling her skills. Celia takes the Demon Lord's hand to walk away, but the blonde-haired boy, named Rhodes, stops her, asking about the Demon Lord's identity. Rhodes laughs and mentions how there is no way that a boy such as the Demon Lord can hold such powers. Rhodes offers her a place in his platoon, but when Celia refuses, he grabs her by her hair. The Demon Lord casts a spell which scares Rhodes, and the spell forces him to kneel to the Demon Lord. The Demon Lord threatens him and he calls forth his holy sword. Just then, a black-haired girl, called Fine, walks towards him and mentions that this isn't allowed and that he is in the area of the female dorms. Rhodes puts his holy sword away and leaves. Celia thanks Fine and she turns and talks to the Demon Lord. She mentions that she will arrange his uniform. Fine mentions how there was a strange sort of magic that was picked up and apologizes for not being able to join the mission. Celia seems to be very tired and the Demon Lord mentions that she might be running out of the magic, and she and the Demon Lord then walk home. She stops in front of a mansion where her platoon lives. They see Regina sleeping and Celia explains that after using holy swords, the user is exhausted. The Demon Lord showers, and Celia helps him use shampoo and asks him to join their platoon even though she does not have her holy sword. Before the Demon Lord can say anything, Celia falls to the ground and the Demon Lord touches her leg, producing a tattoo, and suddenly Celia's eyes turn red and she bites his neck. The Demon Lord tells her the truth, that he did not heal her with his holy sword and so he did not save her, and she is officially dead. The episode begins with a flashback from 2 years ago. Celia fights robots, trying to call upon her holy sword. Rhodes stops the training and mentions that all of this can be fixed if she joins his platoon. Regina walks towards him and uses her holy sword to get Rhodes to back away. Celia is upset that she cannot activate her holy sword. Then in the present, Demon Lord watches as Celia rests. Celia wakes up confused as she was in the bathroom a few minutes ago, and the Demon Lord tells her that he carried her to the bed using sorcery. Celia asks who he is and the Demon Lord tells her that he has been reincarnated. He explains how his magic is based on sorcery and not a holy sword. He also mentions how she's the strongest queen to ever exist. She is a vampire queen. This is when Celia tells the Demon Lord about her past. When she was 7, her hometown was destroyed by the Void, and her family was killed in the process as they were all holy swordsmen. The Demon Lord and Celia head to the cafeteria, where Celia comments that she doesn't have an appetite, but she wonders if she can still digest food. The Demon Lord pulls out a gold coin, and Celia doesn't know what it is. She mentions that he can't use that as the assault garden only accept credit as payment. The Demon Lord is shocked. A blue-haired girl is stopped by 2 men. She mentioned that she doesn't have any cash on her and that if they can wait a week as her paycheck is going to come. They ask for her CL9s as collateral, and she's very quick to slip them off their feet with her support and mentions that she is a student there. Her name is revealed to be Sukuyu, and the two men were the bouncer at the casino she was at yesterday. Sukuyu is the attacker of the platoon, and her village was also wiped out by voids, and so she has dedicated herself into killing them. The Demon Lord's inquiry has now begun, as a teacher is there to determine the type of holy sword he possesses. He calls upon his wand, and when asked about the ability, he mentions that it depends on the situation. His first task is to kill the 4 robots in front of him. As soon as the teacher looks up from her iPad, she notices that the Demon Lord has already killed them all. She's very confused, as this does not replicate a holy sword. Rhodes shows up and says that he will be the one handling the inquiry from there. He sent 4 of his platoon members to fight against the Demon Lord. Rhodes mentioned that if they lose, Celia would have to join his platoon. Celia and the Demon Lord fight against the 4 members. Celia fights with a sword, whereas the Demon Lord uses sorcery. Rhodes uses his holy sword and stops Celia from moving, knocking out her sword from her hands. As Celia is frozen in time, the Demon Lord is left alone to fight against all 4 of Rhodes' platoon members. Celia resists Rhodes' magic to protect the Demon Lord, which unleashes her holy sword. She moves and breaks Rhodes' holy sword. As soon as Rhodes' sword is gone, his platoon members also lose their holy swords. Back at home, the Demon Lord tells Celia that she is one of his minions. She asks the Demon Lord to make her even stronger. They have a feast as Celia has attained her holy sword, and for Leo's induction into the 18th platoon. Celia mentions that she doesn't feel like she's reached her full potential. Fine asks Leo for his bio data, and Sokuyu asks where he will be staying. Sokuyu and Fine both invite him to their respective rooms. Celia says that he should be in her room instead. The registration is eventually completed in Fine's room. The Demon Lord catches sight of a map, and Fine gives him her tablet to examine it. Once the Demon Lord is able to enter the iPad, he examines the map of the new world. The Beast appears to mention that the technology that the humans have created is brilliant, and that he will continue his investigation. Sherry returns and she brings him donuts. She mentions that no one in the city knows about the Demon Lord nor about the war that took place 1,000 years ago. Sherry asks if he has turned Celia into his minion, and he says yes. Celia steps out to ask for help from the Demon Lord. The scene changes, and there are divers who check for void outbreaks. Something catches their eyes, and they notice a strange tree-like creature that's attached to one of the chains. It cries Linus before attacking all 3 of the divers. We flash back to many years ago when Sir Linus, the renowned hero of the Holy Sword, was only 16. The Crown tasked him with policing the entire region for disruptions. His accompanying village commoner commends his noble efforts to combat monsters in the countryside, while the other 6 great heroes are occupied with protecting the Imperial area and the Holy City. In response, Linus remarks that monsters make intriguing opponents, and he would relish the opportunity to capture and train one. Upon hearing this, the commoner's expression turns suspicious. Upon reaching their destination, Linus realizes that the commoner has vanished. Before he can react and draw his sword, 4 magicians paralyze him, while soldiers ensnare him with chains. Despite Linus' desperate struggle, the soldiers impale him with their spears, inevitably leading to his demise. As they stand before his lifeless body, the soldiers confirm that their mission to eliminate the great hero has been successful, and he is no longer a threat to their master. After a certain amount of time, a goddess appears and converses with his soul. She questions whether he harbors resentment towards humans for their betrayal. He responds that he had anticipated it, thus he harbors no anger. The goddess believes that he is the savior of humanity, stating his existence is necessary. She reveals that she has been observing him for some time. Subsequently, she revives him, following which she requests that he pledge himself to her. Upon returning to consciousness, Linus remembers the goddess and addresses her as Roselia. He suddenly notices the bite marks on his neck, finding them annoying. He calls out to Celia, who quickly responds to his voice. Confused by her immediate reaction, she questions the reason for her awakening. Linus explains that, as his minion, she is now compelled to follow his every command unconditionally. This revelation concerns her, as she fears she may be required to perform unsavory tasks. Linus assures her that he would never require such actions of her. He then points out her inappropriate behavior of drinking his blood while he was asleep. She apologizes, and he reassures her that he doesn't mind her feeding from him. He understands her bloodlust during the night, but he would prefer if she asked for permission next time. At that moment, Celia's phone rang. It was Fine on the other end. Fine informed her that the commanders had been summoned for a meeting concerning the divers who had ventured deep and were now reported missing. Fine assured Celia that she would keep her updated on any further developments. In the meeting, the commanders discussed the disturbing news that all divers from the platoon were reported dead. The suspicion was that a newly mutated void creature was responsible for the tragedy. After further deliberation, Commander Cooper declared his intention to assemble a reconnaissance in 4th Squadron, composed of their top 3 platoons, to investigate and eliminate the void creature. Next, we observe Celia training with artificial robots, while Linus admires her impressive techniques. He sidesteps her question about his own swordsmanship, preferring to keep his great holy sword's identity concealed. He then inquires if she ever had any instructors. She replies that she learned the basics from her family and then became self-taught. Given that she's the vampire queen and has an enormous mana supply, Linus offers to teach her how to incorporate sorcery into her fighting skills. He summons an army of skeletons with a call to his wand, declaring them as his lower-ranking minions. He advises her to exercise restraint against them. Undeterred, she slices through their armor and bones with exceptional swordsmanship, defeating the entire army. Linus expresses his admiration for her adaptability and growth in strength. Gratefully, she proposes treating him to a meal at a nearby campus restaurant as a token of appreciation. Initially, he resists, uncomfortable with the idea of constantly depending on her financially. However, his stomach betrays his interest in a meal, a reaction he finds utterly absurd. In another flashback, we witness a city under attack by monsters. An elderly mage appears, casting a spell to create an artificial star. The heat from this star begins to incinerate the city. At this critical moment, the 12-year-old Linus unsheathes his sword, interrupting the mage's spell. He states that he cannot tolerate the city being destroyed in such a manner. With determination, Linus starts to fight off the monsters, successfully eliminating all of them. After his heroic victory, the city's inhabitants cheer for him, hailing him as their hero. We now arrive in the present, at the Council of Commanders meeting. They report that the Void has targeted another research facility and disappeared without a trace. One commander reveals that a swordswoman from Platoon 18 has gathered crucial information about the Void. They bring her up on the screen for everyone to see. Fine, appearing on the call, reveals her findings. After analyzing the Void's frequency and movements, she discovered its presence within the assault garden. This claim incites an uproar among the commanders, who regard her statement as preposterous. However, the city's defense system also confirms the detection of an unknown entity within the garden. They conjecture that the creature might have exploited a flaw to infiltrate the safe zone. At that moment, the alarm sounds, prompting the commanders to prepare for an investigation of the intruder. Concurrently, the 18th Platoon girls discuss the situation, with Fine expressing curiosity about Celia and Linus's whereabouts. Shifting to Celia and Linus, we find them at an orphanage, sharing a meal with the children. Celia has volunteered to spend time at this establishment. We return to the command room where Commander Copper is remotely monitoring and directing a SWAT team to the Void's reported location. Upon reaching the underground system, their receivers detect the Void's presence, but suddenly the cameras disconnect. The commanders attempt to call for backup and defense teams. However, the camera views are restored and communication is re-established. The soldiers report they've lost the Void and it's on the move. The defense team reports that the Void is moving towards the power plant, targeting the energy of the assault garden. Fine confirms that the Void is indeed a Void Lord with the ability to tap into the power plant's immense energy reserves, potentially triggering a stampede. The commanders have issued an order to protect the power plant at all costs. However, engaging with the Void, which behaves like a plant root, is quite challenging. As a last resort, they have declared that the assault garden will shift to fortress mode. Meanwhile, they are starting the evacuation of the citizens and preparing the military personnel for a potential stampede. The soldiers are currently engaged in combat with the Void. However, they are struggling to prevent the Void from making contact with the power plant. The Void has attached itself to the energy source and started to draw power from it, which is causing disruptions in the electrical currents. Celia and Linus hastily exit the house, only to witness the sky breaking open and a stampede initiating. As monsters emerge from the cracks, the headquarters transitions into fortress mode, activating the defense weapons. The decision is made to summon the trained swordsmen from the platoons. As the fortress launches attacks against the monsters, Fine, Regina, and Sakuya summon their holy swords, readying themselves for battle. Linus, impressed by their offensive prowess, watches on. Meanwhile, Celia rushes into the orphanage to secure the children, just as Sherry makes her appearance. Linus expresses suspicion at Sherry's impeccably timed arrival, as if she had been tracking him, but he nonetheless directs her to safeguard Celia's friends. Sherry accepts the order and departs. Celia prepares for battle, summoning her sword, while Linus follows suit by calling upon his wand. They engage the monster, but suddenly another fissure appears in the heavens, revealing a colossal dragon. As the dragon descends, Linus turns to Celia, asking for her protection as he prepares to cast a potent spell. He weaves his destructive magic, causing fiery rain to descend upon the dragon. Then, he summons his dark star, dispatching the dragon with its immense pressure. As the dragon's remains dissipate, the ground cracks open and the void's roots ensnare Celia, dragging her into the abyss. At that moment, the void reveals itself to Linus, who realizes it's the old mage he accompanied when he was 12 years old in his past life. In another flashback, we see Linus having transitioned into Roselia's minion and assumed the role of a demon lord. Upon his return from the battlefield, Roselia commends him for evolving into such a formidable demon lord and presents him with a gift in recognition of his significant victories in battles. She contends that his previous heroic sword has no place in his new role as a demon lord, and hence transforms it into a demon sword. However, the blade can only be unsheathed under specific circumstances. Returning to the present, the body of the void begins to stir, signaling the impending production of additional voids. Linus, using his fire magic, dissolves his barrier and expands the crack. Checking the minion mark, he notices that Celia is still alive, providing him an opportunity for her rescue. He summons the Black's Shadow Prince and together they navigate through the labyrinth of underground passages until they reach the power plant. The location is overrun with the invasive roots of the void. Linus employs his fire magic once again, igniting the void. However, the void counters with regenerative magic to extinguish the flames. The void then addresses Linus, expressing surprise that he survived, as it believed Linus perished a millennium ago. Linus responds, explaining he only sealed away his soul. The void then proclaims its mission to annihilate and reconstruct the world, restoring its glory. It then generates smaller voids from its roots, which begin to sing in a choir-like manner. Meanwhile, we see Celia ensnared by the void, her mouth restrained, rendering her unable to respond to Linus' calls. Linus launches an attack, utilizing his powers, and Blackas follows with his fire breath magic. Despite their efforts, they make no impact. Given the void's connection to the power source, it possesses seemingly limitless power. Celia, struggling to escape and aid Linus in his battle against the void, summons her sword but is immobilized. Despite her desperate efforts, she manages to form shards from her blood on the wall, which she uses to cut through the void's trap and liberate herself. Suddenly, her wings expand, and she slices through the void's body, making her escape. Linus, impressed by her use of her own blood to form wings, catches her as she descends, expressing his pride in her expanded vampire powers. Together, they prepare to launch an attack on the void. The void amasses its power, forming an energy orb with the intent to destroy the city. Linus flies towards the void, gripping his wand. Recalling Rosalina's words about the demon sword questioning his truth before activation, Linus addresses the sword. He declares his desire to wield its power, claiming the land and assault garden for the undead king. Henceforth, all who reside there shall become his subjects, whom he is bound to protect. With this declaration, he activates the sword, using its power to obliterate the void and halt the stampede. Linus tells us that the city suffered greatly as a result of the voids, but restoration efforts were already underway. However, the power plant, the source of the humans' mana supply, was badly damaged, so they were forced to use solar energy until it was repaired, which in his opinion was an incredible feat of engineering. That was why, although he had officially claimed that land as his kingdom, he had to admit there was still much he didn't understand. He then arrived to the vault, but his access was denied since he didn't have the proper authorization. But what surprised him was that apparently the owl that prevented him from enter was a spirit, which confirmed him that spirits had also survived during those 1,000 years. The owl then told him that he had to put a request with the administration bureau if he wanted to enter, but luckily, or not, Regina appeared and, after making him feel uncomfortable by teasing him with her breasts, he managed to convince her to help him enter the vault. Speaking of playing tricks, Regina apparently was a spirit medium and managed to manipulate the owl to let them in. By the way, thanks to that, he managed to learn that even spirits were manufactured by humans those days, Plus, it seemed that the original spirits had mostly disappeared when the Void invasion started. Nevertheless, in that moment they received a message from the Administrative Bureau informing them that their whole platoon had been invited to the commendation ceremony, which was a big deal since only a select few students had gotten that honor. Moreover, the ceremony was going to be hosted by the 4th Imperial Princess, Alteria Reincarnates. That was great for him, since it gave him an excuse to ask about the upper echelons of that world. But what really caught his attention was the fact that Regina decided not to attend the ceremony. Inside some kind of dome, a black lion called Bastia was saying to an elf called Jack that the ceremony was their chance to kidnap Alteria. Apparently, they planned to exchange her for their comrades that were imprisoned in the imperial capital. Then, a werewolf called Jerder added that the Empire had locked the demi-humans up in the place where they were, which was called by the humans as a conservation ward. A leopard called Giraffe and a female goblin called Elza were also with them. In fact, Elza asked Bastia how he planned to deal with the humans without having holy swords like them. Those words almost ignited a fight, but they were interrupted by a woman who mocked them by saying that the Alpha Wolf Alliance of extremists was lacking in the solidarity department. They became wary of her since they didn't know her, but she offered her help to kidnap the princess by bestowing power upon them, a power that surpassed a holy sword. She then bestowed a demon sword to Bastia, and once he showed the others his new power, they got convinced. In fact, they even bought her idea of stealing the Hyperion along with the princess, since with the ship they could sail into the capital to rescue their friends. In return, she asked them to deliver her all the holy swordsmen alive. Right after, she finally introduced herself as Sharnak, the Witch of Everdark Forests. Later that day, Linus arrived at the harbor and got marveled by the battleship where the ceremony was going to be held, to the point he decided to get 2 or 3 for his demonic army. He then went to buy a gift for Rhysselia and found out that elves still existed in the world, and that all demi-humans lived in a special ward. Shortly after, the princess appeared on the deck to salute the people without knowing that Regina was secretly spying on her. As for Linus, he was amongst the crowd, and a little while later Rhysselia, Sakuya and Elfine found him there. He then gave his minion the gift, which she loved, and afterwards they all boarded the ship. While walking, Linus asked about Regina and they gave him a vague answer, but in that moment Fenris Edelritz appeared and began to bother Rhysselia, although the blonde girl congratulated the other for awakening her holy sword. Our protagonist then learned that both girls were childhood friends. Inside the ship, Bastia and Jerder killed 2 guards and used their faces, literally, to shapeshift into them in order to easily get closer to the princess. Meanwhile, the ceremony carried on and everybody was having a good time. As for Linus, his investigation made him discover that somebody was attempting to cover up the historical past since he couldn't find a single mention of the gods, the 6 heroes, the goddess of rebellion, or the 8 demon lords. Sherry, who was investigating the ships on her master's orders, then appeared in front of him and told him that the ship was powered by a mana crystal and had defenses similar to the assault garden. It even had flying weapons. Unfortunately, they got interrupted by Rhysselia and 2 of the young girls they protected during the Void attack to the city. They invited him to the pool, and although he tried to refuse since he couldn't swim, they ended up convinced him. That night it was time for the princess speech, but she and her guards got ambushed by the extremists, although Alteria's pet managed to escape. Unfortunately, Sharnak appeared and told her that letting the Master Key ran off changed nothing. In that moment, the other members of the Alliance revealed themselves and captured all the guests, including our protagonist and his platoon. Fenris tried to engage, but they threatened her with the civilians, so she had to surrender, especially since the elf's demon sword allowed him to use bombs. However, Fenris kept taunting them, and thanks to that Linus discovered that they were planning to sacrifice the swordsmen to the goddess who had gave them their powers. Our protagonist then told Rhysselia he was going to see if the princess was safe and disappeared in his shadow. The extremists took the princess to the bridge and she used an elemental spirit to activate the ship and set course to the capital. Unfortunately, she discovered they would be sailing directly into a void reef, but Sharnak ordered her to crash the ship into the reef since holy swordsmen tainted by the miasma of nothingness would be the perfect offering for the goddess. In fact, he even betrayed the extremists who didn't want to risk their lives by sailing into the reef. Bastia tried to fight her but ended up killed, and the leopard immediately pledged his obedience. Meanwhile, in the dock, people noticed that the ship was moving ahead of schedule, and Regina found the royal family's carbuncle. Thanks to that, she found out the ship was in trouble. In that moment, the ship finally sailed, but Regina managed to board it, and shortly after she ran into Linus, who had gotten lost, and she revealed to him that she was the princess' older sister. Regina then explained to Linus that the day she was born a red star known as the Scarlet Calamity was shining in the sky, which was a bad omen. For that reason, since royal family shouldn't have been born when that star was visible, the king sentenced the fourth princess to death. However, Duke Crystalia knew the situation and pleaded with the king not to kill her. Afterward, according to the official story, the infant was buried in the forest, but in reality one of the duke's son, Lord Edward, secretly brought her back to his home, and both he and his wife claimed that the infant was a sister of the same age of their biological daughter. Regina's real name was Regina Reincarnates, and she revealed to Leonis that that secret was only known by her platoon mates. Right after she told him that she was there because she had found her sister's pet, and added that members of the royal family possessed medium abilities of princess priestess. Moreover, that carbuncle was the source spirit that controlled the ship. However, since the ship was moving without that spirit, that meant her sister was in trouble. Leonis then explained the situation inside the ship and added that they both should go to the bridge to rescue the princess. Back at the banquet hall, Elfine told Reincarnates that one of her drones was hidden, and thanks to that she managed to analyze the bomb's functionality, so they both set up a plan to jam the bomb and neutralize it before the elf could detonate it. And since they couldn't use their holy swords, Reincarnates decided to use the power of the vampire blood instead. Leonis and Regina arrived at the bridge because there was no one. Plus they had locked course and shut down the control panel. Our protagonist then told her to use the source spirit to reach her sister, but she was not sure since that would force to reveal her existence to her sister, to which he replied that there were more important things at stake in that moment. Shortly after, she managed to communicate with her sister, but only told her that she was a random medium. Alteria then told her that she was being taken to the flying deck, and Regina replied that they would be there in no time. But the princess said that the ship's safety came first since it was going into a void reef. Alteria then explained how to use her carbuncle to the spirit monitoring system at the heart of the lowermost deck to take back control of the ship. After hearing the details, Leonis told her to go there since he would be going to rescue the princess. Regina hesitated a little, but he showed some of his power, and she decided to trust him. Back at the banquet hall, thanks to the combined efforts of Sakuya, Fenris, and Elfine, Reincarnates managed to break the elf's demon sword, and they all defeated the extremists afterwards. Unfortunately, right after they noticed the ship was almost in the void reef. In fact, some voids began to board the ship and attack the people inside, so they had to protect them. Immediately thereafter, Leonis contacted Reincarnates and informed of their plan. Then he asked to buy Regina some time because he would make some arrangements to deal with the voids. Shortly after, Reincarnates found Regina and protected her while the rest of the platoon remained at the banquet hall. Some time later, Regina regained control of the ship, and we found out that the access code was Calamity Star, which meant that the princess had her dead sister in her heart. At the same time, Leonis prevented the chopper where the princess was from departing, and Sherry helped his platoon mates to defeat the rest of the voids. Back to the flying deck, Leonis defeated Sharnak, but when she was about to reveal the goddess name, she turned into a demon lord slayer, a very specific one that our protagonist immediately recognized. Leonis and the monster began to fight, and Regina used the defense system of the ship to give our protagonist support. Shortly after, Reincarnates also appeared to help him, and thanks to that he managed to use his demon sword to vanquish the creature. Some time later, the princess thanked Reincarnates, Elfine, Sakuya, and Fenris, but when Alteria asked about the medium and the young boy, they replied that both of them were indisposed, which saddened the princess. Although they passed Alteria a farewell message from Regina, which improved the mood of the princess. As for the two people in question, they were back home, and Regina was teasing Leonis, although she thanked him for making it possible to talk with her sister for a little while. She didn't need more than that. The police launched an operation in the conservation ward to capture the extremists, who very quickly got surrounded. However, before they managed to arrest them, our protagonist appeared in disguise and neutralized them. He then forced the extremists to kneel and introduced himself as the demon lord Zalvates. Afterward, the remnants of the Alpha Wolf Alliance joined Leonis' cause, and he renamed them as the Devil Wolves. He then took them to an underground labyrinth he had created to hide them, although a badly timed call from Reincarnates almost ruined the impression he had given to the extremists. As for Reincarnates, he was worried since more and more crows arrived to her house, since animals in the darkness domain tended to flock to vampires. Afterwards, she began to look for Leonis and discovered Sherry, although the maid immediately disappeared. Some time later, Leonis returned, but a series of unfortunate events led him and Reincarnates to be caught by Regina in a very risque situation. A while later, they were eating, and Regina let them know that the whole academy was already convinced that their dorm was haunted. After all, there was a huge black dog skulking around, and a ghost girl who showed up sometimes. In fact, Rhysselia said that she had indeed seen the ghost girl, which startled our protagonist, but he managed to drive the conversation towards the practice match they were having that day against Fenris' platoon. Some time later, the match was witnessed by a lot of people, including civilians in the upper echelons of the academy. As for the match itself, Rhyselia's platoon was leading the battle, but Fenris managed to counter their strategy and force her childhood friend and Linus to battle her and a comrade. Unfortunately for Fenris, Rhysselia managed to obtain a power-up thanks to her unwavering will and defeated her. Linus also helped, but as per usual, he managed to keep his low profile. Later that day, Rhysselia was taking a bath along with Leo, which still made him feel uncomfortable, especially when the other girls were also present. The thing was that according to the academy regulations, children could bathe with their guardians until the age of 11, regardless of gender, and Rhysselia was registered as our protagonist's guardian. Afterwards, they discussed about the match and the lessons they had learnt thanks to it. In an unknown place, the Void Lord, Nephekes, were offering the demon swords Sharnak had created by ruining some holy swordsmen to a strange statue of the goddess of prophecy. However, he still couldn't help but wonder who had killed her. Some time later, Rhyselia's platoon was summoned by one of the upper echelons of the academy, who informed them that they had received footage from an observation base located inside Void territory. She then showed them the footage, and they all could see that the city that had vanished into Void territory 6 years before, the third assault garden, had appeared. However, the important thing was that the city had begun to move, and after analyzing its course, it was determined that it would reach them in 7 days. Moreover, a distress signal had been sent out on 2 separate occasions, which might indicate there were survivors in it. That was why Rhyselia's platoon was given the order of doing a sweep of the city. Their mission was to investigate how the distress signal had been sent and search for survivors. They also had to shut down its power plant. Furthermore, they had 72 hours for doing that, since otherwise their base wouldn't be able to retreat. Of course, combat was permitted as a means of self-defense. Rhysselia then accepted the mission, but when she asked Linus to stay, he refused it. The next day, Linus asked Blackus to stay back protecting the base and asked Sherry to go with him. Shortly after, the platoon departed. While they were flying to their destination, Regina and Rhysselia began to compete on who had the right to attend Linus. In the end, the blonde girl won, and while Linus was on her lap, he began to recall when Rhysselia first told him she was going to disappear and would be reincarnated 1,000 years in the future. Back then he had promised her that he would track her down no matter what form she might take. However, apparently she had also made him promise to her something else in case she ended up turning into something else entirely. He then woke up and noticed that Regina and Rhysselia had switched places, plus they had almost arrived to their destination. Unfortunately, due to a strange fog, they would have to conduct the search on foot. Shortly after, they landed on the city, and Rhysselia divided the platoon into 2 teams. Leo and her would head for the power plant, and the others would be in charge to pinpoint the location of the distress signal. What they didn't know was that our protagonist ordered Sherry to escort Regina's group. A while later, Rhysselia began to recognize some places in the city, but before she could feel sad about it, both of them were attacked by a huge creature.